Therapists that have cried during a session. What happened? I cried when I had to say goodbye to a client of mine who was dying in hospital. We had worked through some pretty challenging things together, and he had a huge impact on me, and I felt it was important for him to see that in my tears and words as I said goodbye. My patient cried and said there's nobody on this planet who loves me anymore. I cried when I left because I knew she was right. For context, she was 95. Her husband and son had died. She had a personality disorder that made her behavior unbearable for her environment after her husband died, and every person still in her life were paid for to be around her. She died a few months after this conversation. Had a sweet little boy tell me about the death of his dad, who was his little league coach, tragically died the week of the big championship game. He went ahead and played the game the day before the funeral. He hit a home run and shared tearfully how the next day, he put the baseball in his dad's coffin at the funeral with his team all standing around him in support. Hell, now I'm crying again. Therapist here. I've gotten misty-eyed a number of times, but only outright had tears fall once. My client was very vividly describing the week her newborn daughter spent in the NICU, ending with the day that they knew she would pass. She told me what it was like to hold her baby as she died in her arms. The feeling of grief that filled the air was just too much for me to hold in, so of course a few quiet tears rolled out of my eyes. I was doing a cognitive assessment for a girl. We were doing tests, and at one point she started crying. She was unable to tell me why. She was fine just one moment before. I'll let her collect her thoughts. Then she said softly, I don't want to be more stupid than my friends. She wasn't actually. She was very bright, but she didn't know that she has dyslexia, dysorthography and dyscalculia. I realized that she went through 13 years of school without help. Her parents didn't want to do an assessment as they thought she was just lazy. I told her that she was very brave to decide to get help, and things would get better after our assessment. And I felt tears in my eyes. And for everyone asking, first of all, I have great empathy for parents. For most of all is just a matter of ignorance. Fear in parenting is hard. If you are a parent and you see your kid struggling, please listen to professionals. We are here to help, not judge, and we will find ways to help you and your kid. Disorders don't go away. Don't underestimate it. The sooner you get help, the better the outcome can be. It's okay to be scared, but we are here for you, and we understand you. Second, I'm really sorry to read so many heartbreaking stories about people that weren't believed and struggled being undiagnosed. I wish you all the best. I hope you are in a better situation and you got or you'll get all the help you deserve, because you do deserve it. Third, if you think something's wrong with me, get help if you are in a position to do so. Worst case, you understand yourself better and have a chance to make peace with parts of yourself. I made my therapist cry once and only once. We had been working together for 4 years. She learned about the substances and gun violence during my upbringing, the many friends who were murdered to gun violence, my absent parents, the dad who was heavy-handed when he was around, the struggles in school, and traumatic brain injury, but never once shed a tear. She helped me sort out my depression, anxiety, and to think more confidently. She was wonderful, and with her hard work and my new psychiatrist we cut out the depression and anxiety meds and switched to Adderall. We learned I have had ADHD my entire life and my upbringing made it hard to diagnose. A lot of the symptoms overlap with ADHD and childhood trauma for those who grew up in rough neighborhoods like myself. She cried when I told her that Adderall changed my life. She was sad it took 4 years to figure it out and apologized for not seeing it sooner, but I wouldn't change it. She helped me realize my life was not the norm, and I didn't need to continue to suffer from my past experiences. She is still helping me to this day, and I'm a lot better because of everything she did, not just the ADHD diagnosis. I was working with a deeply depressed client who had a lot of negative self-talk about how she was always a failure. We were exploring the origins of this and how young she was the first time she felt self-blame. She told me her earliest story of when she was in 2nd grade. Afterwards, as we were processing it, I expressed that it wasn't your fault about the story. She just broke down sobbing and said nobody has ever said that to me before. In between sobs, it hit me and I cried a little. I cried after I worked with a kid who described an emotionally difficult situation with a sibling. The kid's experience aligned very similarly to something I went through with my own sibling. When I was the kid's age and I hadn't realized how much hurt I was carrying from the experience. Being a therapist sometimes means being confronted with things you didn't realize had such a strong impact on you. Luckily, I have a stellar therapist of my own that I can work through these moments with. I see a therapist individually, and my partner and I see her together. She's an absolutely beautiful woman. I'm so happy she's a part of my life. She's helping me work through some very deeply ingrained trauma and all of the issues that come with that. I'm chronically ill and my partner and I were discussing with her things that had gotten harder to do and how they were affecting me. I had started crying about not being able to shower properly and that I needed help now. My partner reached over and grabbed my hand and said, "Even if you weren't sick, I'd wash you. I'll wash your hair, I'll wash your feet, I'll help you go to the bathroom whenever you need. You don't have to do anything alone. I'll help you." I was crying, and when I looked at my therapist, she was crying too. She said, "That's so beautiful," and wiped her tears away. She's helped us through a lot of really hard things, almost leaving each other because of how my trauma manifests in the relationship. She's seen my health deteriorate and helped us grow closer. She's heard a lot of screwed up things from me about my childhood. I think my partner's genuine expression of love was just the thing that touched her and is the sort of thing that is why she does the job that she does. Client who lost her husband talking about how due to a miscommunication at the hospital she thought she'd have time to say goodbye before he passed away, taken off ventilator. But when she came back into the room he had died and she wasn't there for him dying. Everyone got to say goodbye except her. She loved him so much and it totally broke my heart. All of her story was so sad, so this was icing on the cake really. At the time I worked with young adolescents and this story has and always will stick with me. One day I had a few scheduled sessions that would be done on college grounds. I get through the day and prepare to leave. It's around 5 PM. And as I'm walking to my car I noticed a student just sitting at the bus stop. I walk by and say something like "Bus running a bit late huh?" And she replies with "I don't know." As I take a moment I notice a few flags. I say "Gdaj" and introduce myself, show her my faculty pass, and ask if I can take a seat. For like 5 minutes we are just sitting there silent. Then bam, I remember I had a little pack of Skittles and a Milky Way, best chocolate bar out there, in my bag. And I whip those bad boys out and ask her which ones are better, Milky Way or Skittles. She says Skittles, and I pass them to her while asking how her week's been, and she just starts to let it all out. It's around 6ish now, and I hint that we should contact a family or friend to come and pick her up. We sit and I wait with her while we continue talking. As her ride arrives I ask her if she would ever like to talk again, and to my joy she does. I give her the appropriate contacts and say goodbye. I get to my car and I just have a good cry lol. I'll leave it at that since there's more, but that was the first time. From where I've left off it's been 2 months, and we've had a session once a week and far out man. The amount of sadness coming from this small thing. I was still quite fresh in the field, so I myself was still trying not to take things personal, but this was heavy. Dealing with miscarriage, sister passing, mother leaving and her boyfriend too. Throw in all the pressure of end of year exams. It's enough for anyone to explode. It's the end of November and the end of our session. I walk her out and go back to my office, and there's a thick envelope on my coffee table. I open it up, and in the first paragraph I know it's a suicide note. I hesitate for a moment, but I notice the letter was really crinkled compared to the envelope, and as I read on written the date at the end, I was able to backtrack my visiting dates to the college, and found out it had been written within those few days I had met her. Behind that letter a freshly written one was left. Without going into further detail, it was just her mentioning a few things, expressing her appreciation with a Skittles smiley face saying Skittles are still better. After that we had a few more sessions, but eventually parted ways by mid-December as she felt like she could move on with her life. It's a lovely sight seeing the burdens that weigh us down slide off people's shoulders. I still kept in touch with her for a while, and even with her father even to this day. Sadly she passed away in 2018. I originally started seeing my therapist so I could start making changes to the negative thought patterns / habits I had ignored for years. Shortly after I started with her, my partner was diagnosed with a rare cancer. She was there for the lengthy diagnosis journey, and when I had to tell her yes, it is cancer, I could see tears well up in her eyes. I'm not sure if it brought up feelings for her own personal experiences, or if it was because she felt just that emotionally invested in mine. She was very professional the entire time though. I've usually cried after sessions if a client has shared some trauma or life experiences that have set them up for a difficult life or feelings of unworthiness. In session, I have cried more when clients share big successes or are graduating from services because they've met goals and such. One example was when a client who struggled with discussing their struggles with mental health due to peer perception at school wrote about their pet passing away for a writing class. In the writing, they shared about how helpful their pet was in coping with their struggles and how losing them had been very difficult. They were so afraid to submit it it would be the first time they shared about their mental health outside of a handful of people. 6 months later they were on a stage sharing about the same struggles to an auditorium filled with strangers. I cried during both moments.